Everyone, one of the cool mechanics that you find in Savage Worlds is a thing called support. And that provides a real big opportunity for narrative areas where players help each other out to solve a task. We want to talk about that today.
It's a savage world. Strangers a weird war. It's a savage world. Classics to explore.
Everyone, it's Carl with Eric.
Hello.
And this is Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff, support, help, visit, contact, all that good stuff. So today we wanted to dig a little deeper into support, which seems like that's a simple topic, but it's more complex than you think. But what is support? So let me kind of set it up, and then I'm going to let Eric jump in with some more of the details around the real nitty gritty. But support essentially is a way for a player character to assist another player character with a task by finding a skill that makes sense to roll against, and if they are successful, they add a benefit to the other person who's trying to succeed. Simple, right? So let's dig more into the mechanics around it. Eric, you want to take that away?
Yeah, sure. So when you want to support somebody, you tell the GM what skill that you're using to support. So this is, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but this is really where a lot of creativity can come into play, because essentially you can use any skill. There's certainly some skills that can be used more often, and we'll talk about that later, but you choose a skill, you roll the skill. It's a normal target number of 4.
Mm-hmm.
If you hit 4, you give a +1 to whatever the other player was trying to do. If you get a raise, it's a +2. When multiple people support, the maximum bonus that the primary person who's rolling is a +4. So even if you have 5 people trying to support one person, the biggest they can have is a +4. And the only caveat to that is that strength, like if everybody's if one person's trying to push something, those don't have a max. So anything with strength doesn't have a max up to reason, right? So everybody can provide their full amounts as long as it could make sense. Like everybody can get a hand on something.
Right.
That's the idea behind that.
Yep.
Supporting is valid in all the spheres of play. So you can use
That's
this
right.
in combat. You can use this for social stuff. You can use this for dramatic tasks, chases, whatever you have you. So yeah, that's the basics of the mechanics of support.
So that's an important part, and we'll get a little bit into that. But it's available in combat, so I'm sure everybody's mind is already starting to whine as to how you might be able to use that. But another really cool thing in Savage Worlds is tests. Support and tests are different. So how are they different?
Well, test is the offensive side of support of that, like supported for helping people, tested for messing with the enemy. And we'll talk about this. I mean, we can talk about this now. Is that when you're building a character, you can build a combat character, you can build a social character, you can build all these things, and usually people will have even if they're a face, they'll have they have a gun and they have a D6 in shooting or something, right? They have something they can do in combat. But often it's much better that if you're a face character to kind of spec into either support or tests. So, as either your main thing that you want to do, like if you want to be the supportive player, there's definitely edges and skills all for that. And if you want it to be like the person who debuffs people, there's a lot of support for tests. There's probably more support for tests than there is for supporting.
Right.
The only thing that I'll say is that, go on.
Well, I was going to say, maybe you were going to jump in, but one of the things that, keep in mind, there's a lot of stuff there for tests, but okay, why don't I just always use tests? Because, I'm negatively impacting the enemy. Well, keep in mind, tests are opposed, support isn't. So providing that benefit to your own player isn't opposed versus if you're going against an opponent, even though tests can be pretty powerful from a combat situation. But we don't want to get into that. That we can talk more about
we'll do another
detail.
Video on that. But that's a really good point. So when we're comparing them, why support over test? Like you said, it's just much easier to support. It's much easier to support, and it's also much easier to use any skill. I mean, certain skills works better with tests, like fighting, but those work equally as well with support. you could say like, I'm supporting somebody with fighting means that you're basically doing the same thing as a test. You're just giving that bonus to your friend instead of negatively impacting an enemy. Also, like we said before, supporting can be done in any sphere of play. So with tests, you're primarily doing that in combat.
Right.
Maybe a chase or something. Support, you can do it at all times. Also, one thing to point out, I think here, Carl, is that even if you aren't spec'd into tests or support, and we're mainly talking about support here, it's often if people have trouble in combat, if you're against something that you don't have a heavy weapon or they just have really good parry and you only have fighting, right? It's often really good to use support or tests. So I think people miss that a lot, and we've talked about that in prior videos where we think tests and support often get, at least we've seen, like I've seen, they often get kind of forgotten about.
Yeah, I mean that's the I think people come in from kind of that D&D side where everybody takes a swing and they hit it or they don't and they go with it. In Savage Worlds, we know that you have to get past the parry to do something. If something has a high parry, your tank can be swinging all day and not doing anything. And support now allows others to, through creative use of skills, and we talk a little bit about that, right? It's a narrative tool to say, what kind of skills can I use to support what this fighter's trying to do? It could be anything, right? It could be athletics where you're, helping him, you slid him to the side when the guy wasn't looking or something, right? You can do your athletics, or you could do something else. I mean, I think I've even had some folks say, hey, can I use common knowledge on this creature we haven't seen before to know maybe there's a weakness? I mean, there's almost anything you can do there. And then that bonus, that +4, makes a huge difference than if you are trying to get across a parry threshold. So
or the person with a bow shooting or whatever. And that's a good point. And another reason why support, like I was saying, if you're not spec'd into it, support is the easier than test to just do casually, because really you can do support with any skill, and because it's not opposed, you're only trying to hit that lower number. You can try to use support with your best skill. So say you're a scholar in science. You can use science to support a lot of things, including combat. Like you can argue that, you're like telling that, you're looking at the ground, and you're like, well, I know that slate rock there is loose, so telling the fighter to kind of position the person over that, you could make that argument, using science to give support.
And I think I think you're hitting on the head. We mentioned a little bit, but it is a narrative. How you use the skill is a narrative piece of what, again, makes the game fun, right? It's like, how can I bring in a skill that makes no sense, potentially, like you said, research or something, or science. But if I'm creative with it, the game master can give you that benefit and say, yeah, wow, that'd be kind of cool. People think usually tests are easier to think about, and that it's like, well, I'll use this to throw sand in its face, which will affect it. You can be just as creative with support. And I think that's goes back to people don't think of using it to its fullest because they're going, well, I'm not really a support build kind of thing. I don't have all these, edges and stuff, which we'll talk about. But no, I mean, if you've got the highest scorer or the highest die type you have is in, your specialty, like you said, science, hey, come up with something interesting and let the game master, I mean, what's the worst case? They're going to say no.
Exactly. Never hurt to ask.
Yeah.
And a lot of those skills, like Woodsman's giving you pluses to survival, right? Like survival can be used in a lot of ways to do support. Now we should say the one other caveat here is that similar to tests, the GMs will often limit if you're trying to use the same thing over and over again. So you come up with a really good idea, like using science to point out the dirt over there is looser than the other dirt, whatever. And the GM's like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, you can totally use that. Don't expect to be using that every round.
That's the same thing as dramatic tasks and many other things,
tasks. Yeah. But if you are often, now this is going to be different from table to table, but if you are spec'd into support and you're using certain skills, then I would expect GMs to be more lenient about that. Like if your build is, I took this and I took this to give support to people, and you want to use support every round, I would expect the GM would then be more lenient. But for more kind of casual supporting, don't expect to be using it every round. Like it's just not going to be happening. Do you want to give any more examples of creative? I think we gave a good amount of creative.
But a lot of these were sort of I don't know if they're really combat focused, but we mentioned outside of combat, there's things you can do. So even something that seems like it's a single player character thing, like I used the example of jumping a cavern. Well, yeah, that's just this guy's got to roll his athletics. Well, what if somebody says I want to support them leveraging my athletics to, give them a boost and throw them over? Yeah, why not? Because you got the guy with no strength and no athletics, and he's going to fall in and die. Think about that. Think that it's not very few things are like absolutely single player thing or character thing. Yeah, probably some, but a lot of them aren't. So that's where the creative side of it comes in and flexing that narrative muscle. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah. So what do you want to talk about next?
Well, I think we talked about how the mechanics kind of work and some of the creative ways, but now we wouldn't be doing a video if we weren't talking how we can help be better at it. How you would look at that. And I think that's where a lot of things from edges and other things come into effect that help you be better at it. Like you said, if you've got a build that's kind of aligned. So you want to talk a little bit about those?
Sure. So really the best support skills, the main support skills, and like I said with a face character, the ones that are kind of the most universally applicable are going to be persuasion and performance. And you would think performance, that's crazy, but think about the bard. And really performance doesn't have a lot going for it. So, let your players use performance for support. And the main support edges are using persuasion and performance. That's what they use and their prerequisites. So the one thing though I would say with persuasion and performance, and this is stuff like, you got it, or like so inspirational quotes to your friends, or performance is you could be telling a poem or music to inspire them. Just think of a bard, right?
Yeah.
So some of the edges there is that'd be good for this would be charismatic, which gives you rerolls on persuasion, fame, which gives you bonuses to persuasion and performance, attractive. Now this one's a little iffy that, if you're just really hot and to other players, I don't know, like your hotness, and then you're getting that bonus for persuasion. I mean, but it's true. Hot people do, people do like them more. Reliable, the reliable actually just gives you a free reroll on all support. So that's one to keep. The only thing with charismatic is like if you're speccing at yourself as why I probably wouldn't choose reliable if I'm kind of using persuasion mainly for tests, then charismatic would be better because that's you're using your face skill. You're getting the reroll to when you're rolling persuasion for face skills stuff, and you're doing it for tests. So I think in that instance, charismatic would be better. And then you have work the room and work the crowd, which are really cool, which give you kind of a AOE for your supports, and that only uses persuasion and performance. So that lets you do multiples. And with work the crowd, it's actually 3 people at once. It's kind of like rolling frenzy, but with persuasion. And then of course Elan just always good.
Well, you must always bow down to the altar of Elan, regardless of what you're doing, right? Yes.
Yeah, no matter what build you have. So those are kind of the main edges, and that's why persuasion and performance are just kind of the main skill. I think a cool shout out here is also Notice. Notice is really easy to get people support on a lot of different skills. But there's no rerolls with Notice, but you can get stuff like Alertness or Investigator or whatever to give yourself a bonus. So Notice is also just kind of a good one.
Yeah, but don't fall into that. Everybody's trying to notice, and that's what they're always trying to do. Trap.
Yeah.
All right, so how about so you've got a character that's kind of got this, like work the room. That would be great for even think of something like a social conflict going on. How they're working. You can always picture in your mind. It's like, hey, yeah, that guy's got a good idea. Yeah, don't you think? Yeah. We're all like, yeah, what a great idea, and boosts him up, and then he's talking to the king or whatever, and I just love it. It's just it's so cool. So, right. So what? So we talked about some of the edges and things that play into it. Let's talk about. Do you got a support build? What would be like? Is there a thing that Eric would say? I've got a support build for a certain thing.
Yeah, Well, there is. So besides the ones I listed with those edges, which is on its own support build, I think the actual best supporter, and I would say this is more of for combat specifically, is the battle leader. This is somebody that if you spec into battle, and so you have to take commands, you want inspire and you want natural leader. Those are the basics. And at battle probably at least D8. And the big thing there is inspire, which inspire allows you to roll your battle and give everybody that support for the one skill. So I had a character in Carl's game in the last campaign that was spec'd into leadership stuff and had this, and it was really powerful. And I could basically, depending on the situation, people wouldn't always take you up on it. So basically with inspire, you choose you say, I want to inspire everybody's fighting. And then you roll battle, and whatever you get, that goes to everybody for if they want to do fighting. And you can do stuff like this with, rolling spirit. You can do stuff like this rolling notice or rolling athletics. So this could be really good if you are like in a chase and you're trying to run away or something. So I think the best one is with doing battle. And you probably also want scholar for this to give yourself that +2 on battle. And of course, reliable to give yourself that free reroll.
I think we forget about inspire. I think people forget about that as being it's extremely useful. Like you said, the fact that you can change what trait or skill you're working against. That's
and it goes to everybody.
And it goes to
the whole party. So if you have a big party, with work the room, you're doing 2 people. With work the crowd, that's 3. With inspire, that's as many players and non-player characters. So if you have a lot of non-player characters, that also works amazing. But, helping with player characters, you have to have that natural leader edge. So battle's always, with this, you definitely have to spec into it heavily because you have to invest in command and natural leader just to be able to affect other player characters.
Yeah, and if people don't know, natural leader is the thing that allows edges to now apply to wildcards. So you keep talking about, hey, it helps everybody in a party. The gate to get there is natural leader, as you mentioned.
Natural leader, yeah. And this is all season 2. So this comes on a little late, and it's very edge intensive. So don't expect to be, this coming out until the end of your season's rank or even veteran.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say to you, so again, this is mostly for in combat and with it, and I guess probably stuff like chases, but whether you could ever apply this out of combat, that would really be up to the GM. So up to you, you as a GM, would you allow people to do this, to use Inspire out of combat? Because technically it's,
It says once per turn. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't. I mean, again, it's a narrative tool, and you have to be creative, right?
Yeah.
So if, let's think you use the example of strength, or, we're all trying to move a boulder. Right. So Inspire sounds like an opportunity to have somebody, for this one action, right? One turn, one action. Come on, everybody, heave, work with me, heave, and give everybody a little bit plus on their strength. And then that rolls into them supporting others. And why not? What the heck?
Yeah.
You just have to frame it right. Obviously it's geared towards combat or that kind of, but, so
because it uses battle.
But you could figure out
that's the so talk to your GM, I guess. Again, in the thing, there's really nothing. It doesn't really talk about that. It has to do with your knowledge of battle. It just uses battle. It's leaders inspiring those around them. So battle's already such a niche skill.
Right.
I would also Carl, I would allow people to do it because it is so. You have to spend so much resources to get here that. But it's very powerful.
And I thought this is another. We had the conversation before about whether novice characters, whether it's better to start at season or not. This is the kind of build that really works out well for starting at season because you can kind of get part of the way there at the beginning of the game because that's what you want to be, and you're not. Well, I got to spend a whole bunch of advances just trying to get close, and I'm somewhat ineffectual till I get there. So this is a great, if you are going to start at season, this would be something that you could do, even though you still need a few edges past that. But, I mean, you can get some, I think it's a good example of why seasoned helps with making characters more interesting for folks who are trying to build out.
Cool. I think that's, unless anything else you can think of for support, I think we've covered.
Yeah, so the big thing is people forget that the max is +4. You can, I forgot that all the time. So +4, be creative. If you're a player, you can, if your GM is really into helping with the support, you can probably really stretch reality a little bit to be able to pull in that support. So think about that. Game masters, the whole point of a role-playing game is to have fun, narrative, we all are in control. So if the players are coming up with cool ideas on how to leverage it to do support, that's just fantastic. Take advantage of that. And, last but not least, there are edges and things that can help make that more... powerful is not the right term, but make it a more interesting niche of its own. Things like Inspire that provide some coolness. It's a whole nother build, right? There's always, face, like you said, face character, this character, that character. Here's another interesting build, and you can make yourself a little more unique and interesting, right? So it's cool stuff.
Yeah.
So, all right, I think that was pretty much, that was fun talking about support. Next time we talk, we'll, maybe we'll talk about tests. That's also very interesting. Hopefully this was valuable in some shape or form. Again, I'm Carl with
Eric.
And this is Tabletop Tango. Please look at the bubbles, do the stuff, contact, support, visit the website, all that good stuff. So thank you much for watching, and we'll catch you next time, okay?
Happy gaming.
It's a savage world. Strangers a weird war. It's a savage world. Classics to explore. It's a savage world in the land of the